Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. Boxing insider Rick Glaser is reporting the Deontay Wilder and Luis Ortiz pay-per-view event drew just 138,000 buys. So I'll get to his statement in a moment, and then a few thoughts, because obviously 138,000 buys itself, not a great number. Really, you can call it a bit of a flop. This was an event that was heavily promoted and advertised. And this number, if correct, and Rick Glaser is a boxing insider of some repute, and he often does have the inside track on these numbers, 138,000 will, I'm sure, be a blow to Deontay Wilder's ego. And in terms of the revenue generated from it, just over $10 million. So we'll come to that a little bit later on, because salaries galore to pay for the event, and obviously other bits and pieces. So you could probably look at this 138,000 buys and describe it as a financial bloodbath, and that's something that Rick Glaser has done. So his statement, see here on screen, Facebook: "Oh my, now we know why PBC and Fox didn't release the Wilder-Ortiz rematch pay-per-view number. Wow, even way lower than I expected. A financial bloodbath for Fox and PBC, just 138,000 pay-per-view buys. How bad was that? Crawford Khan was zero advertising, did more buys, and Fox really advertised Wilder-Ortiz heavily. It goes to show you the pay-per-view model is broken unless it's an absolute demand fight, and further demonstrates Deontay Wilder can't draw. If a fighter only draws hardcores and not the general sporting public, he's not a pay-per-view attraction. It's that simple. It further illustrates what I've been saying for 2 years. The apps are the present and future of boxing programming, period." This number was way below what I originally predicted. When the fight was first announced, I said 220,000 pay-per-view buys. But Fight Week, I saw it was DOA, dead on arrival, and was estimating 180,000. This is a real quandary for the Wilder-Fury rematch scheduled for February 22, even though Wilder-Fury will have real demand. All comments are welcomed relating to all of the above. And people have been commenting. At the time that this video was, that I recorded this, screen captured, almost 200 comments here. And someone actually said to him, "I'll wait on the official numbers," to which Rick Glaser responded saying, "Keep waiting, they won't be releasing because of SEC corporate laws pertaining to fraudulent reporting of corporate figures of publicly traded companies. So they just won't release the figure, as they would have done it already if it was a good number." And that's the thing, when pay-per-views do well, the numbers do come out relatively quickly. The promotional companies involved leak the numbers to reporters and everyone crows about the numbers. But when it's not so good, yeah, it seems to be a bit of a wall of silence. And by now, if it had have been a good number, as Rick Glaser says, we would have heard what was actually going on, what the number was. So Rick Glaser, I don't have anything to doubt what he's saying, because he is a reputable source, a boxing insider that has the inside track on pay-per-view numbers. Very reliable in terms of the information that he puts out. So he's saying 138,000 pay-per-view buys, and if you do the calculation, it's about $10.3 million. And there would have been other pay-per-view revenues from other countries that ran the pay-per-view, etc., other licensing fees. But whichever way you cut it, with all the money that they poured into it, promoting the fight, they really did go all out on this, and Fox did a tremendous job. It seems to be that they've gone backwards by a significant degree, because from the reportage that is out there, you know, ESPN, for example, reported that while the listed purse, the first bit was $3 million for Wilder and I think $1.5 million for Ortiz, guaranteed in terms of a purse with upside to increase that figure. Deontay Wilder, according to a number of boxing outlets, had been contracted to get roughly about $20 million, and Ortiz somewhere closing in on $7 million. And if that is to be believed, and I don't have anything to dispute that, you know, the numbers don't add up, and this really is going to be, as Rick Glaser said, a financial bloodbath. But as I sort of noted in a video the other day, when this sort of ridiculous number of 2,500 buys was reported and Rick Glaser's name used to try make that sound credible, this fight was always about building towards the Wilder and Fury rematch. But on the strength of 138,000 buys, I think Rick Glaser is actually right. There will be some concern between ESPN, Top Rank, PBC, and Fox, if Fox ends up being the partner, if they do some sort of, you know, simulcast type pay-per-view arrangement. because 138,000 buys on its own, $75 a pop. Remembering the pay-per-view is going to be pretty expensive wherever it's going, wherever they end up putting it. That's not great business. And Tyson Fury himself, in his fights this year against Schwartz and Wallin, those weren't on pay-per-view as such, ESPN Plus, but he was unable to really shift tickets. 10,000 tickets sold collectively for those fights. They were giving away screeds of comped tickets to help fill up those couple of fights that Fury was fighting in. And obviously they couldn't give enough away to really fill it out. Very dark venues. But on their own, it appears they're not doing big business, maybe not some of the numbers that either would have expected, but together there will be demand for the rematch. But like Rick Glaser sort of says, looking at this, even though there's real demand, it's got to be, cause for concern. Because Bob Arum, for example, he's been talking up a $2 million figure pay-per-view for some time for the rematch. And I just don't think that's really realistic. And if you look at the actual sort of landscape of pay-per-view, it sort of has been on the decline for some years. And when a fighter is not in a fight with someone that the fans want to see, the numbers don't do well. And let's face it, this Ortiz fight, it was a recycled, retread fight that fans weren't really calling for. It was foisted upon fans, and they did a good job of promoting it, but obviously fans didn't really want to have a bar of it. And I'm sure the streaming numbers for this fight, in terms of illegal streams, probably will be quite high. And you'd have to imagine an event like this, because this was obviously a test of Deontay Wilder's star power, on his own, without a demand sort of fight that people were calling for, he could only shift 138,000 pay-per-view buys. So it shows he's not necessarily a massive commodity unless he's in the right fight. The Wilder-Fury fight, 320,000, 330,000 buys, December 2018. On his own, 138,000. He'd accused Tyson Fury of not being a draw, that he was the one that shifted all those buys back in 2018. But it's clear it's a mixture of both. They both needed each other to really push that event and make it something that people wanted to buy. And when you take him out of the equation, Fury that is, Wilder on its own hasn't done so well, because Ortiz, he wasn't the draw for that fight. People were expecting, for the most part, that Ortiz probably would lose that fight. There was a bit of support swinging towards Ortiz late in the piece through the promotional efforts of Fox, and they were obviously trying to make him look like a credible threat, but it hasn't translated into buys. And as Rick Glaser said, a financial bloodbath. So they would have gone well backwards on this fight in terms of the money that's gone out, as opposed to the money that's actually come back in. Because Deontay Wilder Luis Ortiz, you just tally up that figure, they were due $27 million overall. That's a lot of money, and they've made just over $10 million back. And I'm sure some people will say this is fake news, Rick Glaser, don't trust him, but actually he's been incredibly reliable over the years, and I don't have any reason to doubt what he's saying. And let's face it, if the pay-per-view number was really, really good, something would have come out. You would have seen Dan Rafael or Mike Sources Coppinger coming out reporting the figure. And I guess the writing was on the wall to some extent when the prelim figures came out. They were 141,000 people watching the undercard prelims, which were on FS2, I believe. And those numbers were way below some other pay-per-view fights that have happened in 2019 that have involved the likes of Errol Spence, Mikey Garcia, Manny Pacquiao, etc. So the fact that those numbers were lower, it wasn't a great sort of indication of what the pay-per-view number was, but 138,000 buys, not great at all. And I'm sure it will be a body blow for Deontay Wilder, who claims he's the biggest thing in boxing right now. But maybe with hardcore fans he's resonating, and he's growing his brand, etc. But it's not translating to the public at the moment. And this rematch with Fury, we have to maybe be realistic. Maybe 500,000 buys is more realistic. As it is, the Canelo-Golovkin, the first fight, did roughly 1.3 million. I think the second fight did roughly 1 million. If they were to get anywhere near 1 million, I think that probably is good going in the current climate of pay-per-views, especially at $75. It's a lot of money to shell out, and if people don't believe they're getting competitive fights, obviously in this case with the Ortiz rematch, they're just not prepared to lay it out for a fight that they've already seen and probably know the result of the second one. And ultimately, it played out how most people thought the second fight would. But what do you make of this? 138,000 pay-per-view buys, not flash. Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.